Betrayal. When we are betrayed by someone we have trusted implicitly, we are to follow the example of the Lord Jesus Christ, who prayed for his fickle friends and his worst enemies. Here's Gene.
David definitely understood betrayal. Psalm 52 reflects betrayal by Doeg the Edomite. Psalm 54 reflects betrayal by his own people, the Ziphites. And Psalm 55, this psalm, reflects betrayal by a close friend and confidant. And as I was thinking about this principle, and when I was thinking about what happened to David, a close friend, and by the way, we don't know who this close friend is. We know it's not Jonathan, who was his closest friend. But it was a close friend. And we'll look at that in a moment. But I couldn't help but think about what happened to Julius Caesar. You see, that goes back to, in our time frame, back to 44 BC. The Roman Empire was in turmoil. And there were liberators. There were people who wanted to retain the republican form of government. But then there were those who were supporting Julius Caesar, and they wanted to have a dictatorship. And it got really heated. And one day, these conspirators isolated Caesar in the old Roman Senate building. I should remember this date. It's March 15th, which is my birthday, called the Ides of March. I don't like to think about that in relationship to what happened that day. But they convened, they got together, they cornered him, and they stabbed him to death. Now, one of the last individuals to stab Caesar was Brutus. And many of you will remember the incredible line in Shakespeare's play on Julius Caesar. And it reads the words of Caesar to Brutus when he said, "Et tu, Brute," which means, even you, Brutus? Now, what makes that so significant is that when Mark Antony got up to eulogize Caesar, here are the words from Shakespeare, which captures what happens. And you remember the opening words, "Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears." And with this eulogy, he said these words, "For Brutus, as you know, was Caesar's angel. Judge, O you gods, how dearly Caesar loved him." This was the most unkindest cut of all. For when the noble Caesar saw him stab, ingratitude more strong than traitor's arms quite vanished him, and then burst his mighty heart. This is what David was feeling. I think it captures David's heart here, because he was betrayed by a Brutus, by a friend, an associate. And he talks about this. Look at Psalm 52, 12 to 14. "Now it is not an enemy who insults me." You know, this is not an enemy. Otherwise, I could bear it. And it was hard enough to bear it in those situations. "It is not a foe who rises up against me. Otherwise, I could hide from him. But it is you, a man who is my peer, my companion, and good friend." We used to have close fellowship. We walked with the crowd into the house of God. In other words, we worshiped together. And you betrayed me. And he's feeling some horrible feelings about this. For example, we have these words described if you walk back up into the opening part of the psalm in verse 2, nervousness. "Pay attention to me and answer me. I am restless and in turmoil with my complaint." And believe me, betrayal can create incredible restlessness and turmoil. I'm thankful that I haven't experienced too much betrayal in my life as a pastor over the years, but I've experienced some betrayal by those that I've trusted. And I'm going to tell you, it's painful when they turn on you, or they say things that are evil, or wrong, or lies. That can really, really cause pain and fear. Fearfulness, fear and trembling grip me. Horror has overwhelmed me. That's a strong word, but in a sense, David was feeling this because his life was being threatened, obviously, because he was betrayed by a friend. Another emotion that he talks about and action is escape. And this is interesting because I said, if only I had wings like a dove, I would fly away and find rest. And I think that's probably a death wish. I am feeling so miserable that I'd just like to fly away, die, be removed from this horrible situation. And so we have here a very difficult situation. And I can remember back in my own situation where I was betrayed by an individual. And it was a horrible betrayal because I didn't understand everything that was going on until this person eventually went to prison and it was revealed who he was. It was a man that I had really trusted, really had trusted, and turned on me and turned others against me. Those were horrible feelings. And the interesting thing is that one of the men that was the most encouraging to me during this time, who became one of my fellow pastors, eventually also betrayed me. A man that I looked to and trusted, and he betrayed me primarily because he was caught up in an immoral situation. And to cover his own sin, he betrayed me. Now, thankfully, both of these men have asked my forgiveness. I forgave them before they asked for it. But it's not a good feeling. But you know something? It's at times like this that you begin to really understand what it means to have a high priest who understands those feelings, because Jesus Christ was betrayed by his friends. So what happened to David, though this is not a messianic psalm per se, it really is a projection and a story, eventually, in a sense, of what happened to Jesus. And we have, first of all, his betrayal by Judas, who was part of the inner circle, who traveled with Jesus for over 3 years. God trusted him. Jesus trusted him even with the money bag, which he was dipping into. But notice in Matthew 26:47, while he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, suddenly arrived. This is now the Garden of Gethsemane, where the Roman guards are coming. A large mob with swords and clubs was with him from the chief priests and elders of the people. His betrayer had given them a sign. And this is ironic, isn't it? The one I kiss. I mean, that's about the ultimate in betrayal. The one I kiss, he's the one. Arrest him. That's what Judas had said to those who were trying to take Jesus and identify him there at that night in the crowd. So he went right up to Jesus and said, "Greetings, Rabbi." And he kissed him. And notice Jesus' response. And this is not sarcasm. This is sadness. Friend, friend. Jesus asked him, "Why have you come?" He wasn't saying, "Friend." He was saying, "Friend. You're my friend." So Jesus understood betrayal. And you see, when we go through times of betrayal and talk to anyone who's gone through a divorce, who is more of the innocent party in the situation, who's been betrayed, that's one of the most painful acts of betrayal that a person can experience. in a marriage relationship and the pain that goes with that. But you see, Jesus understands that. He's been there. And that's why it says we have a great high priest who can identify with every pain, every experience, including the acts of betrayal. And then we have Peter's denial. Peter, of course, was in a whole different setting, different man, different situation, different heart. But notice what Jesus said to Simon Peter when he was saying, Lord, I'll never forsake you. Everybody will, but not me. And Jesus turned to him and said, Simon, Simon. And by the way, anytime you see Jesus reverting to the word Simon, it's his original name before he called him Peter. And that's significant because he says, Simon, Simon, look out. Satan has asked to sift you like wheat, but I have prayed for you that your faith may not fail. And you, when you have turned back, strengthen your brothers. That is, I think there he's referring to the other disciples who are going to really need your leadership. But you are going to deny me 3 times. But I prayed for you. But that's another form of betrayal. And Jesus, of course, demonstrates and illustrates this principle. And let me just restate that principle so you see the connection from the text and the principle. When we're betrayed by someone we have trusted, implicitly, we're to follow the example of the Lord Jesus Christ, who prayed for his fickle friends and his worst enemies. And so here's the question. Why is it sometimes very difficult to forgive and pray for close friends who have betrayed our trust? It's painful. I got a email shortly, time ago, from a young girl. She's now in college, almost through college. I got to know her when she was 8 years old. She lives in another country. But she had a very difficult time because she didn't have any arms and she didn't have any legs from her knees down because she had, when she was just 9 months old, went through an operation to save her life from a horrible blood disease. And when I saw her, she had her prosthetics and sweet little smile on her face, about 8 years old. And I've maintained a relationship with that little girl as her pastor long distance for years. She just wrote me an email. Because you see, what happened was that when she was just a young girl, older, she was in high school, her daddy betrayed the whole family and left the family. And she has tried over the years to develop a relationship with him, but always turning his back on her. And she would write me emails, what do I do? How do I work through this? And I've got a stack of emails that thick with this little girl, now a grown girl, wonderful, wonderful, godly young woman. And the most recent one was that her dad wrote her an email and she shared with me what it was, and he was asking forgiveness. But you know why she wrote to me? Why am I having a hard time trusting that he's telling me the truth? That there's just another act of manipulation. And I wrote back and I said, your feelings are normal. They're understandable. But in God's time, you'll discover whether or not it's sincere. Just don't be upset with yourself because you can't suddenly overcome these feelings of trust or lack of trust. That's betrayal.